Hello and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Michael Gray.
And I am Erin Green.
Hello, Erin Green. How are you?
Hello. You always say that in like a sing-song kind of tone, and it brightens my day.
I feel like I'm a little bird outside, just like chirp, 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 just bringing happiness, you know?
Speaking of, the birds are going crazy here. I put out my hummingbird feeder is hung again, and they're frequent visitors.
Frequent flyers.
It's lovely.
Yeah. Nice.
Hey, we have a guest today, everyone.
We have a guest today.
It's exciting. See, Michael likes to sing everything. Y'all are used to that by now.
It's my chipper personality. That's what it is.
We are obviously not recording first thing in the morning because he's had a few cups of coffee.
Yeah, a few cups of something. Yeah.
So our guest today, everyone, we're really excited to have Dr. Mary Pritchard from the University of Idaho. Oh my gosh. That was a Freudian slip, and I am so sorry.
It's all downhill from here.
That was bad. I'm totally blushing. If anybody's watching this on YouTube, I'm really embarrassed. She is not from that university. She is from Boise State University. Dr. Mary Pritchard is from Boise State University, and she studies psychology. And let me just read you a little bit of the details of her academic experience, and then we'll dive in with Dr. Pritchard and hear a little bit more about her. So Dr. Mary Pritchard received her PhD in experimental psychology from the University of Denver. She regularly teaches psychology of eating, psychology of health, and social psychology, capstone and special topic seminars. She specializes in body image and eating disorders and has authored over 50 publications on those topics. To learn more about Dr. Pritchard's research and openings for teaching assistants in her classes, you can email her, and we will be sure to link her contact information in our show notes. And Dr. Mary Pritchard, welcome.
Welcome.
Yay. Welcome from the campus of Boise State University. Welcome.
Not the University of Idaho.
No. I can't believe I did that. Totally. And coming from the U of I know that some people would probably have just left the conversation as soon as I said that. So I'm glad you're still here.
Yeah. My husband would have left. He's a Boise State alum, and he gets very I'm like, you know what? It's Idaho. Like, people think we're Iowa. I mean, right. Come on. If you get the state right, we're doing good.
I know. So thank you for being so gracious with that Freudian slip, because I know why it happened, because we are planning our annual conference for the statewide dietitian conference at the University of Idaho next year. And I'm in the thick of having conversations around that. And my brain that's just where it went. So apologies.
No worries.
So, we gave the audience a little bit of background from just a, snippet of your academic experience, but I'm more interested in hearing, and I've always wanted to ask a guest this because I listen to Brene Brown often, and she starts with, "Tell me your story." And I would really love to hear your story, Mary.
Yeah, I'd love to share my story. When I was in graduate school, I thought I wanted to study jury deliberation.
Oh,
yeah. I did my dissertation on jury deliberation.
Was something you could study.
Yeah, no, it actually was. I studied jurors' memories and how they remembered and processed trial information. And I'm like, these are the folks that are deciding the fate of the defendant. Let's make sure that they actually know what's happening. And they don't, which is a different story. But anyway, I got my PhD, experimental psychology, studying jury deliberation. As a side project, I was working with a health psychologist studying lawyers and actually stress in law students. And I ended up at my first job post-PhD at this tiny liberal arts college in Indiana, thinking I was going to study jury deliberation. And I did for a couple of years. But something happened my very first semester there that changed my trajectory, personally and professionally. And it was a small college, and so tiny classes. I knew my students really well. Probably middle of my first semester there, and one of my students comes into my office in tears. And I was like, "What's wrong?" And she said, "You have to help me." I'm like, "Okay." And she said she was on Division 3. So it was a Division 3 school, very tiny. She was on the gymnastics team and the cheer team. And she said, I have to lose 10 pounds by Friday, or I'm going to lose my spot on the top of the pyramid. My coach says I'm too fat. You have to help me lose 10 pounds. This was like a Monday. And I'm looking at her, and there's so many thoughts that are going through my head. She's a gymnast. She's a cheerleader. She is solid muscle, right? So part of me is going, from where are you going to lose this 10 pounds? The other part of me is like, this was before I got involved in health and nutrition and went back for a health coaching certificate. But I knew even then that wasn't healthy. And I'm like, okay, no, like why? No, like that's just not something that's feasible, healthy for you, for anybody. Like, I'm looking at her. She said she was less than 10% body fat. And I'm like, no. Like, how is this feasible? And she said, you just don't understand what it's like to be a collegiate athlete. And she was right. I was not a collegiate athlete. I didn't know what the pressures were. And so she and I started talking, and I wanted to talk to her coach. And so I did. And I stuck my nose in probably where I shouldn't have. But this evolved into a project with her, researching body image and disordered eating and the pressures that collegiate athletes faced. And 20 something years later, I never stopped. I kept studying body image. I kept studying disordered eating. I brought into my pool. I talked to parents. I talked to kids. I talked to college students that were not athletes. And I just started to get this picture of the pressure that, at that time, I wasn't much older than my students, right? So, this is over 20 years ago. So I think if they were 20, I was 25, right? So I felt the pressure myself, but even with that small distance in years, I could see that they were feeling more pressure than I felt at their age. And then, the older I've gotten, of course, my students have stayed the same age. So I've seen the pressures that they experience today versus what I felt when I was in college. And it's worlds different. We didn't have social media. I was a senior in college when we got email. It's just a totally different world now. And we had TV, we had magazines. That was the pressure that I felt. Now we have 24/7, 365 social media, nonstop notifications on your phone, pinging you, telling you that this person's posted and this, you should check this out, or there's all of these ads, right? Or influencers, and, it's just nonstop. And I see my students today, and I'm like, this is why I still do what I do. People ask me, do you get bored? And I'm like, no, because the world is changing so quickly that yes, I'm studying the same phenomenon, but that phenomenon has actually changed quite a bit in 25 years. Body dissatisfaction has become a lot broader term, right? You can be dissatisfied with so many aspects. It's a little different in men and women. It varies by age. But it's there, and that this underlying current of pressure that I think all of us face, but especially our younger folks.
So you've been studying this through like the entirety of social media and
pretty
before.
Much, yeah.
That's wild, because it seems to me, and Aaron and I have talked about this, that one of the biggest impacts in body dissatisfaction has to do with social media and the accessibility of those pressures and that kind of stuff. This is a big topic, and I think we could all probably spend a lot of time here, and I'm fine with that if we do. But I guess just to get into it a little bit, so 25 years ago, can you tell us a little bit about what it looked like to study body dissatisfaction then, and how that has changed in sort of some real practical ways with the advent and spread of social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two things that have happened. The first is that about every decade, the standard of what the ideal body is changes. Right. So if you think about going back even 100 years ago to, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s and 90s, right? The ideal keeps changing. And so body dissatisfaction keeps changing with the ideal that we're presented. And these ideals, since it was 1922 when there was an invention of the printing press that made the widespread use of magazines, then at that time were called magazines, very different from what today's magazines, that they started having these advertisements that would tell you that you actually were not good. You looked like you needed slimming soap and you needed tapeworms and you needed whatever. And so
I've never heard of slimming soap.
We have not talked about that one. We've talked about tapeworms.
Yeah.
We've not talked about slimming soap.
Slimming soap, really popular in the 30s, in the 20s and the 30s. That was one of the first kind of snake oil type of things that people were being sold. I think you can actually still find variations of that.
Sure you can.
People sell everything and
anything. Sure you can. It just doesn't have cocaine in it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so back in so we're now in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? So rewind to when I got my PhD in 99. And so it was magazines and it was TV, right? This was before Netflix. This was before Amazon Prime. We had movies and we had TV shows. This was before we had VHS tapes, right? So you can watch a movie on your go to Blockbuster Video, watch a movie on your VHS. And there was pressure from peers, right? So thinking of like the kind of younger students, and even adults, right? We still had peer pressure. We still had, women, especially feeling a lot of pressure from their friends. There was a lot of conversation around fat talk, right? Around this idea that I'm not good enough. And so we'd see these images, we'd think, why can't that be me? And we'd talk to each other about it. And back then, we actually believed that men didn't experience body dissatisfaction. We truly thought it was just a female phenomenon and probably like a middle to upper class white women, period. We thought that you couldn't have an eating disorder if you were not in that parameter. And so we weren't talking to men. We weren't talking to non-white women, right? We were just really talking to this very limited group of folk because we really thought that those are the folks that had problems. It's like kind of this luxury problem, right? Like you have nothing else to do. And so you can worry about your body and have an eating disorder, which is not at all true, right? I mean, it's not, the more we know about eating disorders and about body dissatisfaction, it's not a luxury problem.
What a weird way to title it, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have any, I'm bored. So
I'm
I
bored.
guess I'll have
I just
this
have an eating disorder. It's fine. But that wasn't the case, but we didn't know any better, right? We just didn't know any better. And, we started learning more about eating disorders and about anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa. This is long before binge eating disorder became a thing, or ARFID, or any of the other terms that are in the DSM-5. And it was really about being thin. Right. So think about the body standard. So the 90s, we're talking about Kate Moss. We're talking about the wayfish look. And so again, the focus was on women because it was runway fashion models. That was the look that women were told to aspire to be. It was that wayfish, super thin, almost Twiggy-esque, back from the 60s and 70s. Just a little bit different view of that. And Kate Moss was, I think, infamously quoted as talking about it's better, to be skinny than, I forget what the exact quote is, but it was just kind of along the lines of, if you're not skinny, you should just kind of die, right? I mean, it was just this really terrible statement that kind of hit the heart of girls of everywhere, of just this idea that you're not good enough if you're not thin. And so the focus was really on what we now term drive for thinness. And that was what we thought body dissatisfaction was, period. Around 2000, there was a male psychologist who decided, his infamous paper by McCreary and Sass, they started looking at body dissatisfaction in boys. And nobody had asked boys. And they actually coined the term drive for muscularity. And this is the early stages, right? But think again about what's happening in the 2000s. The bodybuilding world was kind of really taking hold. And so men and boys were being presented with these really, hyper muscular images and told, this is the male ideal. So now we suddenly had two, right? We had kind of the wayfish look for women, which we now call drive for thinness, and this really hyper muscular look for men, which we called Drive for Muscularity. And what McCreary and Sass found in 2000, this pivotal paper, is that it existed, right? So boys actually did experience body dissatisfaction, and it wasn't the same type of experience as girls. Yeah. So they were the first ones to kind of open this world of, it's not just white, middle to upper class women. It's actually boys too. And so that opened this world. And so, the researchers, including me in that field that were just getting started, were like, whoa, we need to grab on this train, and we need to see where it goes. And so I started looking at men, and I started looking at comparisons between men and women, and looking at things like age and how did that evolve and change, right? And again, back then we were still kind of pre-social media, right? Mm-hmm. And so as that evolved, and it was MySpace, and then it was Facebook, right? And Facebook imploded. And then we started getting the appearance related post, right? Because Facebook was about photos. And so we could then see what we were supposed to look like. And it wasn't now just magazines and TV, which is where we went to before to see what the ideal was. Now we had this new world where we could go whenever we wanted, and we could like and follow and comment and friend. And before we had all the different emoticons that have been added since, but just the very basic Facebook, we could find other people. We could form friendships with folks we'd never met in real life from all over the world. And that opened this world of us being able to see people that weren't in our regular social circles from all over the world. And so now we have this brand new source of information. Of what we should be doing.
And don't you think, so I'm picturing when you describe this kind of drive for muscularity emerging in this new research, I was just starting out in college, and I'm thinking of the Abercrombie days. Yeah. Like the Abercrombie, like full length, muscular, lean men, and everybody shirtless, I'm also thinking about, there was kind of this disconnect as a consumer with something like an advertisement where you're like, oh, well, they cherry pick models. And, at least I could kind of rationalize that in my brain. But the shift to social media, in my mind, is this sudden impression that, oh, lots of regular old people just like me look like this. And therefore, I don't fit. It's no longer this like pedestal of, oh, that's a model and they, cherry pick these people. It's all of a sudden in our face that, oh, a lot of people look like this and I don't. Is that accurate?
It's normal people, right? And think about what was going on TV at that point. This was when The Biggest Loser came out,
gosh.
Right? So think about the kinds of this is reality TV. So we now have social media. We have, and I'm air quotes for those of you who are listening in, reality TV.
Right.
Again, we're seeing a very small amount of footage that they've cherry picked out of the days and days and days that they filmed. But shows like The Biggest Loser also gave us that message that these average, everyday Joe and Jane can do this. Why can't I? Right. And discounting the fact that was their job for those weeks that they were on The Biggest Loser, and they had personal trainers and they had personal chefs and they were working out obscene amounts of hours.
And they're basically in a prison.
And they're basically in a prison.
They can't leave.
Right. And the follow-up
themselves.
studies on The Biggest Loser have found that just like normal people, they all gain the weight back and then some. Right. So even the success stories on The Biggest Loser for the most part didn't last. But we don't know that. We don't see that. Right. All we see is The Biggest Loser. And they're losing 20 pounds a week. And so A, first of all, we think that that's healthy, which it's not. And B, you think they can do it. Why can't I with my job and my kids and my carpools and the soccer practice? And like, come on now, where's your personal chef and your trainer and your 20 hours a day that you're, working out, and these 4 hours a day you're sleeping. And it just, but we don't think about that. We just take what we see, we internalize that. We think that I should be able to do that because those are normal people just like me, right? So whether it was on Facebook, whether it was on reality TV, we started getting these images of folks like us. That's the image we were being sold, right? It was folks like us. And so the pressure is now intensified because you're right, Aaron. I mean, it was much easier to rationalize, oh, those are models, right? Like we know that's less than 1% of the population. They have the genetics. It's easier for them. I can't attain that goal. I'm never going to be 5'11" or whatever, right? And so we could distance ourselves from that. And then keep in mind also Photoshop, right? We didn't know about Photoshop when it first came out, but it was being used. But as that came out and we started learning about Photoshop, this is before filters on social media, right? So magazines were using filters, but it was before we had the option to use filters on social media. So again, it helped us create that distance with like a magazine cover because we knew it wasn't real. And so, we could say, yeah, she probably doesn't really look like that. She doesn't just roll out of bed and look like that. And some of the exposés started coming out about Photoshop. And so we were like, oh, okay. But social media at that point, no filters yet. And so we were, again, that pressure of that's a real person and they look like that. And I'm a real person and I don't look like that. And why not?
Yeah. I remember you're talking about just the pressures that media brings. I remember sitting down with a client, a prospective client, in the height of the Biggest Loser days. And she looked me dead in the eye and she says, if I don't lose 40 pounds a month, I'm not going to be happy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I told her at that time, I said, if you lose 40 pounds in a month, I'm not going to work with you anymore. Like, this is dangerous. But that's just the expectation, is what we see. Oh, they're the experts. So this must be what is attainable and doable and good and noble even,
Right.
Real quick, I think I found the quote you were talking about. I just want to see is nothing tastes as good as skinny feels.
That's it. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, you think about that for a second, makes you want to throw up in your mouth. That's gross.
Yeah.
And
it lingers. That belief lingers and that message lingers.
It does.
Like everything hinges on getting to that thin ideal or getting to that muscular lean ideal. So
better to not eat.
And that was like, the quote that was plastered everywhere. And when she was at her peak of her career in the 90s and 2000s, just that was the female role model. Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. And that does last. I mean, we know that childhood experiences like childhood teasing have a lasting impact 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. And you have to stop and think about where does my belief come from? And like it dates back to when I was 8 and my aunt said, you shouldn't have a second helping. Right. But we don't think about that. We ingrain it and then we don't question it and then we move on. And so now, starting in the 2000s, we just had so many more influencers, right? So it wasn't just family and friends anymore. It wasn't just TV and magazine covers. It was everybody. It was anybody, right? Because the world was your oyster, so to speak. We could just be friends with anybody and everyone. And, more social media networks started coming along. So then we had Twitter and then we had Instagram and Snapchat and, and now we have TikTok, right? And so this world just keeps expanding.
Yeah.
And kids born today never had a world without it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I still remember what it was like when Facebook came out. They don't.
Yeah.
Because that's been their reality from day one.
You mentioned childhood experiences. Have you been able to dive into that in your research at all? Like identify common themes in, kids' experiences that make them more likely to be dissatisfied? Because I talk with my clients all the time. Like you said, it's like, I remember sitting at the breakfast table eating cereal, and my mom commenting about my fat arms. And I've never looked back as far as trying to starve myself skinny. And a lot of clients have some real pivotal, even if it's not a specific thing, it's a specific theme, that seems to run through childhood. So have you been able to identify certain things because that's really fascinating to me, like where this sort of stems from internally?
It's childhood teasing. I mean, childhood teasing is one of the biggest teasers that we have. And it doesn't matter where that teasing came from, whether it was a family member or a peer, an authority figure like a teacher in our life. It doesn't really matter, but it lasts. Like we take it in, children are like sponges in some ways, right? We take it in, we're learning so much and we trust We trust everyone around us, and we don't know about Photoshop yet, and we don't know about these unrealistic expectations. And so the things that mom and dad and our Aunt Betty and our teachers and our friends say to us just stick. Yeah. And so the scary thing that we know from the research now is that usually between ages 3 and 5, children already know thin is good and fat is bad. That's how early they're getting that message these days. And of course that lasts, right? I mean, if you have already picked that up by age 3, that you're a good person if you're thin and you're a bad person if you're fat, that's got a lasting impact. I mean, no wonder so many of us are unhappy. We've been unhappy for as long as we remember because we were told.
Like that's what we're supposed to do is be unhappy.
That's so powerful. And I think of like, you know, even like cartoons and Disney movies where like the villain is a fat person and the hero has a perfect muscular body or a perfect little waist or something. So it's so prolific, and it's really disturbing when you do start paying attention to these subtle messages that we're getting to kids at an early age.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the trope of like, I mean, just about every show for every kid between like ages 5 and 15, it seems like, who is the sort of dumb class clown, you know, sort of buffoonish kind of character that none of the girls want to date. It's the fat kid.
Yeah.
100% of the time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, it's just portrayed over and over and over. Like, yeah, you're a part of things, but not really. You know, you're kind of out on the outside and no one really wants to be with you. And the only real reason is because of the way your body looks. And it's never stated, but man, is it clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're funny, but it's because you're making jokes at your own expense. Right.
Yeah. It's your survival skill.
Yeah. And we see
at least they'll like me if I make them laugh.
Right. Yeah. May not be popular. I may not get, dates, but at least they'll like me because I'm the class clown. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. And Aaron and I have talked a lot about like before and after photos online, just regular everyday people, and just the way that those just incredibly unhealthy beliefs are instantly like reinforced with what I can only imagine are massive levels of dopamine, like just hitting you when you've starved yourself and you're miserable and everybody's like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Keep it up. Good work. And it's like, I'm miserable and I hate my life and my health is suffering, but everybody's like, wow, look at you.
Yeah.
I wish I could do that. And just that accessibility to have those things reinforced is just unbelievable.
And it's a real problem, right? Because a lot of times when you talk to those who actually have diagnosable eating disorders, it's hard for them to let go of it because they're getting reinforced. Mm-hmm. They've lost a lot of weight. Mm-hmm. They're getting reinforced for how do you stay so thin? By folks who really probably want to know what the magic formula is, not understanding that there's a disorder behind that magic formula.
Right.
I have a very good friend who's former student, now a local therapist, and she treats eating disorders. And when she guest lectures in my classes, she said, the problem is society has an eating disorder right now because we reinforce society, social media, magazines, TV, peers, whatever. It reinforces this notion that you're not good enough unless you look a certain way. But the target's always unattainable because it's photoshopped and it keeps changing, right? It's that body standard that just keeps hypermuscular isn't in anymore, right? It's lean and toned. And so it just keeps changing. It's like this carrot that we can never reach.
Right.
Yeah. On that vein, I kind of want to go into some of your latest research talking about the gender differences in body perception that I had the privilege of attending a talk with you last December. And I was just like, our listeners need to hear this stuff because I think society is now aware of the fact that women have been faced with this pressure for a very long time. Right. As you just presented, at the top of the podcast, that all the research was really focusing on this subgroup of women. And now we're really starting to recognize this is an all gender problem. Yeah. This is not just women who are faced with this. So I'm really curious if you could just bring us some of the interesting findings in your latest research with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So men and women still suffer body dissatisfaction at equal rates, right? So when we look at kind of the numbers, it's somewhere around 80 to 90+% of men and women suffer from some kind of body dissatisfaction.
Wow.
We still see trends toward everybody wants to be lean and toned because that's the ideal right now, right? The ideal du jour is kind of that lean and tone, which we call drive for leanness. But within that drive for leanness, women still want to be a little thinner. So the emphasis is more on the lean than on the tone. So they want muscle definition. They want the six pack. They want some shoulder muscles. They want a little bit of definition. Men want a little bit more bulk, right? So it's not quite that hypermuscular look of drive for muscularity. That still does exist in certain populations. And certainly more common in men than women. But that drive for leanness is pretty equal across men and women these days, right? Everybody wants that lean and toned look. It just means a little leaner for women and a little more toned for men, a little bit more of that muscular definition for men. But the interesting thing is, we're a couple of things really come out of this, is we're looking at mental health more broadly, right? And so typically when you have body image dissatisfaction, it doesn't exist in a bubble. It's not just this isolated thing. There's usually depression, anxiety, something that goes along with that. And so what we're starting to find in the research is that, we get exposed to these standards and we internalize those, and that makes us anxious because we feel like we can't meet those. And so we're anxious about our appearance. We're anxious about being around others. We're afraid they're going to judge us for how we look. We're anxious when we post a selfie because, especially if we haven't used a filter, what are people going to think of what I look? If I have used a filter, did I use the right filter? I go through 200 shots to make sure that I've got the best photo with the best filter to make sure that, what are they going to say? Who's going to judge me? It's likes and comments, and that's very anxiety inducing. And it's almost this vicious cycle where like we post the photo anxiously awaiting to see how people are going to react. And then if we get the likes and the positive comments, so that's a boost, right? We get this hit, we get that dopamine, get that serotonin rise, but it doesn't last, right? And then if someone posts a negative comment or doesn't like, or we don't get enough likes or whatever the reaction we were hoping for, then suddenly we dive down and almost it's like a depression because we're not getting that reaction that we want. And so then we have to do something, right, to try to change our bodies so that we'll get a better reaction next time. So what we're seeing is that a lot of this body dissatisfaction right now is stemming from anxiety about our appearance and about how other people are going to perceive what we look like. And even that is a little bit different in men and women. And so it's especially right now concerning that drive for the lean piece, right? So that drive for thinness. And so we see that a lot in men and women, that anxiety really centers more on weight than it does on muscularity. We still see that the muscularity and the tone in men, but that anxiety is really connected to weight for both men and women. Mm-hmm. And so we've been trying to figure out, what can we do? What can we do to try to make this better? And one of the interesting things that kind of has come out of my lab recently is that, body positivity, Instagram, for all of its bad things that have come out about it. The one good thing that it's kind of known for is the BOPO campaign, right? And so for women, Instagram has become, that body positive community has become actually a good thing because it's not, you can find other things besides photos of what you should, quote unquote, look like. Yeah. And so that's been really helpful, but it hasn't been as helpful for men. And so, we're trying to figure out what can we do to help men. And we're still trying to answer that question. Body positivity for men, it does work. It just doesn't work as well in men as it does in women. And we don't know yet why. Is it just that they're not as exposed to BOPO? Because BOPO originally started as a campaign just for women, right? And so men's body positivity came a little bit later. And so I think a lot of men don't necessarily know that it's out there. And so if you're not subscribing, you're not going to see it, right? And so who you follow, again, it all comes back to who you follow. If it's the Instabod, which is actually a thing now, so the ideal man and the ideal woman, the Instabod, if you follow Instabod accounts, the celebrity influencers, then yes, of course, you're going to feel terrible about yourself because you're internalizing that feeling like, well, they're sort of a real person. I mean, they may be a celebrity, but I sort of kind of can look like that, and not seeing necessarily all the filters that are being used on the back end.
I find it interesting. It's right there where you were like, well, we have this BOPO campaign that seems to be helping women. But something that came up in the discussion back in December was that there is the dad bod, movement where it seems acceptable for men to have the dad bod. And yes, this seems to only apply to men who are dads. And it only applies to men. There's no mom bod. There's no mom bod. And so it's really twisted how social media, even though there are positives that come out of what we're talking about, these campaigns that are really trying to uplift like all bodies, there's still these double standards that exist within that, which is just like kind of maddening. Like we take one step forward and then, but there's always a flip side.
No, it's really interesting, right? So if you're female, you can be body positive, but at the same time, you're still being told you can do that, but that's still you should not do that, right? So there's this other image that you should aspire to, because there's no mom. You're right. There's no mom bod campaign. There's no hashtag mom bod that is okay, right? And society standards is okay. And the dad bod is okay, but even the dad bod, it's okay for a brief time, right? And so you think about where the dad bod originated. It was celebrity dads that had gotten out of shape because they weren't filming. But everybody knew that as soon as they start filming their next movie, then they're going to get in shape again, right? And so it's like the off-season look of a bodybuilder almost, where it's like, you still, you can have the dad bod, but it's not, you can't have it long-term, right? Then that's not okay. And so but again, the mom bod, right? You can be, I guess maybe the equivalent, Erin, of the mom bod is it's okay to be pregnant, right? So pregnant women are celebrated. People want to touch their bellies. They're so excited. But the moment you give birth, it's like, okay, now you got to get back to
where's your six pack now?
Where's your six pack? Time to get back.
It's been 2 weeks. Let's go get the program.
It's right. Exactly. Why do you have a six pack yet? It's been 2 weeks. And so I think maybe it's terrible. Right. And so it's like, it's okay to be a female and be pregnant, but that's the only time you can quote unquote be fat. Right. And so when we talk about, unfortunately, when we talk about pregnancy, a lot of times that is associated, the weight gain, right? It's like acceptable only because you are giving birth, you're nourishing life. But as soon as that has finished, right, then it's not okay anymore.
So I'm curious how you would respond to someone who says, like, just thinking about, I work with a lot of postpartum women or even women that are perimenopausal, menopausal, and experiencing changes in their bodies. And they tell me, I'm just more comfortable at this weight or this size, or I just don't feel like myself. How would you answer that when people sort of conflate a look with a feeling and a look with how they identify with themselves?
Right. If you can, without poking too much, right, and triggering something, I would invite them to figure out where that comes from. Where does that belief come from? So that I feel better at this weight. Why? Like, where does that come from? Is it an ability, a mobility? Is it something that someone told you that you should feel comfortable at? Right. So where did that belief come from? Because, sometimes it may be, I've gained 40 pounds and I can't physically do the things that I wanted to do. Right. I can't hike anymore. I can't bike anymore or whatever. And so there may be a reason that kind of physically they just feel limited by their size. And so they're coming to you, Erin, to lose some weight so that or you, Michael, right, to lose some weight to get back down to a size where they're more comfortable and able to do the things that they enjoy doing. But a lot of times it's not really about that. A lot of times it's about this. I feel more comfortable because I've been told I should look like that.
Right.
And so I feel comfortable because people comment when I'm not that weight.
Right.
People ask me, are you going to eat that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see this in your, because I see this a lot. It's like, I feel like, especially when I'm first starting to work with someone, they come with sort of like this arsenal of good reasons to lose weight, right? Like, oh, well, my knees feel better when I'm 20 pounds lighter and my low back doesn't hurt, or, my blood sugar is easier to manage, that kind of stuff, which are all very valid, but a lot of times it seems like that's not really why, because as you dig a little bit, it quickly turns to, I just want to lose weight. I just want to lose weight just because I am supposed to lose weight.
Right.
And it's like we have these sort of like smoke screens we throw up, like, oh yeah, it's for my health. It's for my health. It's because of this. But then underlying, it really is, even if people genuinely believe those things, like, yeah, my knees do feel better when I'm 20 pounds lighter. My low back doesn't hurt if I'm 10 pounds lighter, like that's legitimate. But it's almost like those legitimate reasons for health really get overridden by, yeah, but I'm just fat. I need to be smaller. And just inherently. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, we're still seeing the same images, right? And so it doesn't matter if you're 20 or if you're 50, there's still an ideal,
right,
that's presented to you. And, the algorithms that live on Google and social media that all talk to one another, I'm getting different ads than you are, but they're tailored to me and my age and my gender. And, they're very good. They're very good at tailoring ads to people like me, so that I can, no matter what age I am, no matter what gender I identify as, I can see an ad of someone who is ideal. Right. And it's not necessarily even sold as a weight loss thing. It could be, feel better, or it could be, it could be a jewelry ad. Right. But it's still that image. Like, I mean, you're still getting that ideal image, and we're still surrounded. I don't care what age you are, you're still surrounded by society telling you what you should look like. Right. And of course that gets in. And the internalization piece is that we convince ourselves that it's our idea. Right. So that's the kind of the part that's so frustrating, is that we bought into it so much that we don't even realize that it wasn't ours to begin with.
Right.
And that gets back to that childhood teasing stuff, right? It's like at some point we bought into that idea that my arms were fat, right? And so, and we can't even remember who told us that or where it came from, because now it's our idea. And so you do have to kind of challenge and fight with clients and say, where did that come from? Like, really? Is that something that's true for you? Why do you think that? And, sometimes there will be this aha moment of, oh, I remember when my Aunt Sheila, asked me, are you really going to get a second helping of that? Don't you think you've had enough? When I was, 8 at a family picnic, and like, that just really stuck with me.
Right.
But we don't, because we've ingrained it and we've taken it in and owned it as ours. Oftentimes we've totally forgotten where that standard came from in the first place, where that rule came from in the first place. Yeah.
Wow. It's so profound to hear it put in that light, because I don't think people realize how much information they're synthesizing into their own belief system. And thank goodness for therapists and psychologists like you who can kind of dig into that and have the words and the training and the experience to really, kind of tease that out, because I mean, that is not my area of expertise. And so while I'm aware of it and I have maybe just a very rudimentary understanding of this, I think this just really highlights the importance of why a counselor, a therapist, somebody trained in this area of thought and belief systems, and how we kind of have built our own personal ideals can really help with this area, because people often come to us, both of us, with body image challenges, and they basically say, I need to change my body. Like this, I don't feel good about myself. And the answer is to change their body. And I'll kind of present like, okay, so, we'll kind of explore that a little bit, but then I get to this point where I'm like, well, it sounds like either change your body or change your mind.
Right.
Or maybe a mixture of both, but let's kind of like look at each possibility. And what have you been focused on your entire life? Changing your body. That has been the answer they tell themselves that they need to do. And that just reinforces that I don't fit and I'm wrong, because there's so many biological and physiological and genetic reasons why we can't be successful long-term changing our bodies.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And the reality, I talk about this when I teach my classes, like, the reality is that, again, the models, the celebrity influencers, the folks that are out there, genetically, they have a certain build, right? And so one of the exercises that it's probably going to be easier if you're on YouTube, but hopefully I can explain it. So if you're not, you can see us. So one of the exercises I have my students do on the first day of class is something, okay, hold out one arm and then take your hand of the other arm. And what you're going to do is you're going to get your thumb and you're going to get your pointer finger, and you're going to wrap it around your wrist of the other arm, right? Wrap it around your, yep. So if your fingers, if your thumb and your pointer finger overlap, you have a small build. If they barely touch, you have a medium build. And if they don't touch, you have a large build. That is a bone structure genetic thing. The ideal images out there for most of us, for women especially, are small build, right? And so the height and weight charts, the things that were the shoulds come from people who have a small build. Genetically, I have a small build. If I had a large build or a medium-sized build, there is literally nothing I can do to have a small build. My bones are never going to shrink, right? I mean, that's not a goal that we should have. And so the kind of reality check of, is the standard that you're trying to achieve even possible for you? Because a lot of folks out there don't have a small build.
Yeah.
Or back in the bodybuilding days, right? Those are folks that had a large build, because that was the big, hefty, muscular men, right? Back in the 80s and a little bit in the 90s, like if you have a small build as a man and you're trying to put on, what would be the equivalent of 100 pounds of muscle, that's probably never going to happen for you genetically, because your body, your bone structure can't support that weight. Right. Yeah. And so, having that conversation of just, are your standards accurate, but B, even possible for your body? And please stop trying to punish your body to change something you cannot actually change. So that, Aaron, gets back to you have to change your mindset here, because this standard that you are trying to achieve isn't even physically possible. In no realm of existence is it possible for you, because you can't change your bone build. Right.
Yeah.
And then I just want to follow that up with real quick. People will say, but before I had kids, I weighed this amount, but 5 years ago, I weighed this amount. So it's the story we tell ourselves.
The story we tell ourselves.
It's possible.
It is.
Well, I just think if you hate your body, you hate your body, right? Like it doesn't really have anything to do with its size or its weight. It's your relationship with it sucks, right? And it's understandable, I mean, I think that's most of us for a lot of our lives. It's not a very good relationship. But this idea that if it's smaller, then I'll like it. It's like, no, if you hate it, you hate it, right? And that has nothing to do with your size or your shape or what you weigh. That's just your belief about your body and bodies in general. Right. And just to piggyback on what you're saying, it's like, there's really nothing you can do to be more satisfied as far as changing your body. Right. It's your beliefs and your thoughts and beliefs, how you view them and all that kind of stuff and it's, so we have this massive, trillion-dollar industry. I don't know what it is, multi-billion.
It's like $61 billion weight loss industry. It's insane, right?
I mean, just has the whole process turned upside down.
because that's how they make money, right?
Yeah.
And so if we like
if you never get
ourselves-
there, you're going to keep spending money.
Right. Right. That's how, these weight loss industries, the influencers, I mean, that's how
Mhm.
they make money, is by
Yeah.
making you feel less than, and just kind of piggyback on what you
Yeah.
were just talking about, Michael, studies of the success stories, so to speak, they're still not happy.
Mm-mm.
So even when they achieve their goal, now they've found something else to dislike. You talk to folks that have addiction to plastic surgery, right? And it's like, okay, I got my nose done and now it's okay, but I kind of still don't like it. Or, okay, but now my butt cheeks need it, right? I mean, so there's always something, you're right. I mean, it's this underlying dissatisfaction. And so maybe instead of changing our bodies, we need to really change how we're thinking about our bodies and focus on something that's, you're more than what your body looks like, right? I mean, is that really everything in life that you want? I mean, what about your family and your aspirations for career or just whatever, travel, whatever it is that you want to do? Don't you have a dream that's not centered around
an appearance?
Right.
An ideal.
Before I moved down here, I worked in a gym that there was a very high population of bodybuilders and figure athletes and that kind of stuff. And I knew a lot of these people pretty well. You see them every single day. I mean, they're there for hours, you see them a lot. And they would literally be like 2 days away from stepping on stage. Just, I mean, incredibly low levels of leanness, good muscularity. Basically, you look at them and you think that's the way everybody wants to look, right? Right. And they hated their bodies still. I mean, just little tiny folds. Oh, what is this? How do I get rid of this? My calves need to be, a half inch. I mean, just such nitpicky things to continue to be dissatisfied. And people would look at them and be like, I wish I could look like that. And I'm like, well, they don't want to look like that. They're still unsatisfied. They're still unhappy with their bodies. And there's no end. Like you were saying, there's really no end. If you're dissatisfied, it doesn't stop. A dissatisfaction finds somewhere else to go. It doesn't let up.
And social comparison is so ingrained in us that there's always somebody we can find to compare ourselves to that we feel like is better, quote unquote, than us. In whatever way that, I mean, it could be appearance, it could be financial, it could be dream life, house, there's so many different ways that we compare ourselves to other people. But even when like I said, even when you attain your goal, we're still usually unhappy because now we've already moved on to the next goal and we're not there yet. Right. And so there's always going to be a discrepancy between where we are now and where we want to be because we're never satisfied with where we are now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're edging toward, I believe we've sort of reached this crescendo. Like we've presented a case of why this is really important to talk about. And from a researcher who you've spent your entire career looking at this, please tell us you've gleaned some preventive or actionable items that people can do, other than just go see an informed counselor who can help in this realm. But are there other tools, strategies, maybe for parents of teens or teenagers themselves or people as this is emerging? What do you got for us?
Give us some hope, Mary.
Come on, Mary. We're counting on you.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic, we are spending a lot more time on social media and it's doing its damage, right? Reports are coming out right and left about how we're anxious and we're depressed and we're more unhappy as a society. The American Psychological Association, which is kind of my governing body, just put out this big report about teen mental health and social media and warning teens and warning parents to get off social media. And so most people, when I say that, are like, nope, I can't do that. Right. So it's an addiction in and of itself. And so the first thing that my challenge usually for everyone is just 24 hours. See if you can get off of social media for 24 hours and just observe how you feel. And without that constant barrage of things that you should, quote unquote, be doing or attaining or looking like or whatever. And when I have my students do this, every single one of them are like, wow, I didn't think that I would notice a difference, but I feel so much better. when I'm not engaged. They still won't stop doing it, but at least they have an awareness. And so sometimes they'll put timers on their phones, or they'll, make a pact with friends to not engage in certain hours. And so that's kind of my first general rule of thumb is, if it's not social media for you, what are your influencers? Like who is it? Is it your mom? Is it your sister? Is it your neighbor? Like, who are you comparing yourself to, and why? And really, you don't have to see a therapist to do this. Just start looking at your own habits and kind of getting curious about, when do I feel good about myself or less bad, right? And when do I feel really bad about myself? What has just happened? And if you notice a pattern, oh, I was just on social media and now I feel bad about myself again. Maybe there's a behavior there. I just talked to my Aunt Sheila and now I feel terrible about myself again. Maybe there's a behavior that you're doing that you're not realizing that you're doing that's really having a negative impact on your mental health, not just how you feel about your body, but just mental health in general. And just get curious about, okay, when do I feel good or less bad? And when do I feel bad? And what are some habits that I might want to change around those feelings? Just kind of think about it.
Yeah.
For the parents out there, and even, even if you're not a parent, who are you a role model to? We're all role models for somebody, whether you have kids or not. Right. And so we know actions speak louder than words. So I was chatting with a friend of mine. Oh, it's been probably a decade ago. At that point, her daughter was 17. And she said, I'm trying to do such a good job. Her daughter was 17 and wanted to be a model, right? Wanted to go to California and see if she could get signed, right? And wow. She was lamenting, what have I done? What have I done wrong with my daughter? Why is she so obsessed with her appearance? I've tried to tell her all her life how beautiful she is and how smart she is and how she can do anything. And we were having this conversation over lunch one day, and she was like, okay, I have a question for you. And I'm like, all right. And it's just like, the fact that she sees me weigh myself every day and curse in the mirror, that maybe isn't a good thing, right? And she, like,
maybe.
Yeah,
just maybe.
Because actions speak louder than words. And so, of course, she's going to discount what you say when she sees you treat yourself like garbage, right? And so think about whether it's a kid, a sister, a friend, who are you a role model for, and how are you maybe unintentionally influencing them? Because sometimes for the parents that I've worked with, their biggest aha moment is, I don't want this reality for my kids. I hate my body. I don't want that reality for my children. Maybe I need to be more careful about what I say about myself, what I think about myself, because I didn't realize how they were picking up on that. And so to just, again, not just be aware of who's influencing you, but who you're influencing and what you're saying and actions, right? It may be not even what you're saying about yourself, but if you never eat dessert, but you're always telling your kids to eat dessert, they're going to pick up on the fact that your actions and your words aren't matching. And so it just kind of, again, it's not with a judgment or criticism here. It's just be curious. Be curious about who's influencing you, who you might be influencing, and how that might, what those mechanisms are that might be happening. And again, just with a curiosity, be like, maybe I don't want to weigh myself every day, right? Maybe there's a better way that I could be, in her case, a role model for my daughter, and just kind of just start with curiosity. Again, never judgment or criticism. We're not here to judge and criticize ourselves. We do enough of that already. We don't want to do that anymore. But just being curious about, okay, all right, I do that. Why do I do that?
Yeah. Do you have any websites or favorite books or social media accounts or anything that people can go to and maybe just think about, oh, this is something I could implement in my household, or this is something I could try for myself?
Yeah. if you are on social media, the hashtag BOPO, right? Whether you're
Mhm.
male or female, there is stuff out there for you. And just, most of the sites that I look at are more professional organizations. And so maybe not and look into the Health at Every Size campaign. That's a really powerful one. The organizations like the National Eating Disorders Association has a lot of really good information on there for parents and teens about, how to have conversations about these issues with your kids. So there's a lot of good resources out there. You just have to find the ones that resonate with you. Right. And there may be a little bit of digging, because the things that work for me may not work for you, and that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Love
Mary,
it.
I feel like we could be here for hours. About 10 minutes in, I was like, okay, so can we do this again, like in 3 or 4 months? And then
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I just feel like we have barely honestly scratched the surface of just all of these insights from a clinical perspective, right? From a perspective that isn't emotion driven. And I'm a big emotions guy. I love emotions. I think they can honestly serve us well a lot of times, but when it's just emotion and we can only be reactive to our bodies, and we can't see, things like logically, just to have so much information, and I mean, decades of your work to draw from. I think it's really critical for our listeners and just to have out there. So thank you. I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you so much for this time this morning, because this has been incredibly valuable. And I think there's just so much more that we can and hopefully will get into in the not too distant future. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I just want to point out, so long ago, you had a blog
I did.
on Psychology Today that I found when I was digging up a bio on you, and it was titled "Diet is a 4-letter word." Is that right?
Yeah.
So last year, I had.
Oh my God, I look at that. I love that.
I had t-shirts and tank tops made that say "Diet is a 4-letter word," and I would really like to drop one off for you. So
I would love that.
That's so we'll connect, and I will bring one by Boise State University.
Not the University of Idaho.
Nope.
Go Broncos.
Oh, I know. Go Broncos. Yes. Meeting in the mundane. Should we?
Yeah. Let's
hit
do
on
it.
that. Yeah. Do you want me to lead off?
If you want.
Should we?
Mary, where would you like to go first, second, or third? Guest choice. You want to finish us off?
I've been talking a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Well, Michael, would you like to go first or second?
Go ahead. You seem like you are ready to go.
I am ready.
Let's do it.
I mean, weather in Boise has just been like spectacular we've had a few spring storms, but for the most part been really, really great for the last several days. And Saturday, Matt and I got out for a long gravel ride. Love it. It's one of those, like, you have nothing else planned for the day. So you just get out on your bike and explore and take pictures and just be together. And we got home and it was kind of late afternoon, we're just kind of like lazing about and chilling. And I was out on our patio. We just had our patio kind of upgraded for summer, and it's just beautiful and peaceful out there. And I'm just like really starting to kind of get drowsy on the love seat out there. And I feel these tiny little sprinkles from the spring. It's sunny, like the sun is out, but these tiny little sprinkles just like landing on my body. And I'm serious, it like lulled me to sleep. And it was just kind of this magical moment where you're like, you tend to think, oh, it starts raining, you run inside and you like escape. And it had the opposite effect of me, where I just felt like totally at peace, this moment, and being very present and having like this physical sensation of something just, unusual about the whole experience, kind of feeling it on my skin. It was really lovely. And I appreciate moments like that where you can just be fully present and like nothing else to do, no pressure to do anything. You're just here, and it's lovely. So that's mine.
I love those little showers up there where it's like, I don't know where this is coming from because the entire sky is blue.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like those.
And it's still warm out. So you're it's just very relaxing. Yeah. Love it.
So for me last week, so Monday and Tuesday, I don't know what happened. I was super sick, like super sick, sickest I maybe have been as an adult. And so just under the gun the rest of the week, behind on everything, and so the rest of the week was just pretty stressful. And on, I think it was Thursday or Friday morning, I couldn't sleep. It was like 5:30 in the morning, I was trying to sleep another hour or so, and just thinking about the day. And I was thinking about, I've got a lot to do. My wife has a lot to do. We're both gonna be kind of working late. And I thought, I guess maybe I'll get up and like do as much prep for dinner tonight as I can this morning to just get a head start. And I didn't want to get out of bed. I was grumpy about it. I got into my kitchen, and one thing about me, Mary, is I love to cook. It's like one of my very favorite things to do. And so I got out there, and I'm tired and I'm grumpy, and I make some coffee, and I start, chopping some veggies and cutting up some chicken. And all of a sudden I'm like, this is pretty great. It's like the house is quiet. No one's bugging me while I'm just trying, doing one of my very favorite things. And I put some music on quiet and had like this great, like 45-minute start to my day that started out just with me being a grump about it and turned out to be like, wow, that was a fantastic start to the morning. I really liked that. About 30 minutes in, my youngest daughter came down and, hi, Daddy. And we had snuggles, and she kind of hung out with me in the kitchen. And so it was just, it was really neat to see how something that I was doing very begrudgingly wound up being like, man, this is the best morning I've had in a while.
I love it.
Yeah, it was good.
Oh. So I'm gonna combine your two stories, I think. So a grumpy moment turned into kind of natural beauty. Saturday morning, 5:30 in the morning, my dog woke me up, and Saturday morning is like one of the only mornings I can sleep past like 5. So I was grumpy about the fact that she woke me up at 5:30 in the morning. And I'm like, all right, well, the first thing we do every morning is go for a walk. That's her walk for the day. And I happen to have the good fortune of living half a mile from a trailhead. And I hadn't been in the foothills in ages because it kept raining and snowing here, and the trails have just been too muddy. And I try to stay off the trails when they're muddy. And it was Saturday morning. It was 5:30 in the morning. The sun was just starting to come up, and it was light enough I was like, all right, let's do this. So we walked to the trailhead and kind of started meandering up the trail. And then I came kind of to this top, and there's just sunflowers everywhere. And the sun is hitting the sunflowers. And it was this magical moment of, this is why I love living here. So I forgot, because I haven't been able to be on the trails in so long. I forgot how much I love living in Boise and how much I love being in the trails, and this magical, explosion of all of that water that prevented me from being on the trails led to this, sunflowers everywhere. And like, like you almost couldn't walk without stepping on sunflowers. And it was just beautiful. It was such a breathtaking moment. I'm like, all right, I'm glad we got up at 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday to do this. So I'm going to be intentionally doing that this weekend. I love getting out and being on the trails before it gets super crowded.
Yeah, it's nice.
As Bob Ross would say, it was happy accidents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly. I was just going to say, like, it's nice when it's an unexpected surprise, but sometimes it's even nicer when you can kind of plan for it. And you're like, okay, I'll get up at 6 this time. And, so Dr. Mary Pritchard, thank you so much for your generous time and your research and your knowledge. It was a great discussion. I'm really glad to bring this to our audience.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Share this episode. This is important stuff. This is as important as anything we ever talk about here on Middleish, maybe more so, because it really is about how do you truly become a healthier person, not how do you get smaller, how do you lose weight, but how do you truly internally become a healthier, happier person. And I think that's what we all want, in the end. So please, tag people, share this episode. It's an important one. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for listening.